The 90s gave us blockbusters, but some of the decade's best films didn't explode on opening weekend. They confused audiences. They slipped through theaters quietly. They were labeled too strange, too slow, and were too complicated. And then years later, everyone caught up. And these are the films that flopped and then became legends. Jacob's Ladder, 1990. When Jacob's Ladder hit theaters, audiences walked in expecting a horror movie. What they got instead was something far more unsettling. A psychological spiral that felt unstable from the very first frame. The film follows Jacob Singer, a Vietnam veteran haunted by disturbing visions and fractured memories. Faces flicker, bodies twist unnaturally, time refuses to behave normally, nothing feels grounded. At the time, this wasn't easy viewing. The early 90s mainstream audience wasn't fully prepared for horror that focused less on monsters and more on trauma. The film didn't provide clean answers, it didn't hold your hand, it didn't offer traditional catharsis. And because of that, many viewers left confused, underperformed, reviews were mixed. Some critics admired it, others dismissed it as messy or overly bleak. But something interesting happened over the next decade. Home video allowed people to revisit it, and suddenly its fragmented structure felt intentional rather than chaotic. Its nightmarish hospital sequence became legendary. Its themes of post-war trauma, guilt, and the fear of death started resonating on a deeper level. You could see its fingerprints everywhere, especially in psychological horror and video games that embrace surreal dread instead of straightforward scares. Jacob's Ladder is widely considered a cornerstone of psychological horror. It's referenced, analyzed, and deeply respected. But in 1990, it was simply too much. Too dark, too disorienting, too ahead of its time. The City of Lost Children, 1995. Mainstream audiences in the mid-90s expected fantasy to look a certain way. Bright, magical, heroic. City of Lost Children gave them rust, oil, fog, and stolen dreams. Directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro, this French fantasy tells the story of a mad scientist who kidnaps children to steal their dreams because he himself cannot dream. It's a premise that feels like a twisted bedtime story told in a dimly lit attic. Visually, the film is astonishing. Every frame looks handcrafted. Damp alleyways, exaggerated costumes, strange contraptions humming in the background. Feels less like a traditional film and more like stepping inside an illustrated storybook written by someone slightly unhinged, and that's exactly why it struggled. American audiences especially didn't know what to make of it. It wasn't structured like a Hollywood adventure, it moved at its own pace. It embraced melancholy as much as wonder. But over time, film lovers discovered it. The production design became iconic, and the atmosphere became influential. The film started appearing in conversations about visionary cinema. What once felt inaccessible slowly became essential viewing for anyone who loves imaginative filmmaking. It didn't need a massive box office. It needed patience. The Fisher King, 1991. Some films don't fail loudly. They simply don't get the attention they deserve. The Fisher King, directed by Terry Gilliam and starring Robin Williams and Jeff Bridges, is one of those films. It tells the story of a cynical radio host whose cruel words indirectly cause a tragedy, and the broken man he later befriends while seeking redemption. On paper, it sounds like a straightforward drama, but Gilliam turns it into something far more layered, blending humor, fantasy, grief, and raw vulnerability in ways that feel almost reckless. Robin Williams delivers one of his most nuanced performances here. It's not just funny, it's fragile, painfully human. Yet at the time, the film didn't become a cultural juggernaut. It wasn't ignored entirely, but it didn't dominate conversation either. Maybe audiences didn't know how to process its tonal shifts. It could make you laugh and then devastate you minutes later. It was emotionally unpredictable. Over time, though, its reputation grew. People revisited it and realized how deeply compassionate it is, how it treats trauma not as spectacle but as something intimate and complicated. Now it's widely regarded as one of Gilliam's finest works, and one of Robin Williams' most heartfelt performances that didn't need hype, it needed maturity. Barton Fink, 1991. When the Coen brothers released Barton Fink, they weren't interested in making something easy. They made something uncomfortable. The film follows a playwright who travels to Hollywood to write a screenplay, only to find himself trapped, creatively and psychologically, inside a decaying hotel room. It's claustrophobic. It's surreal. It feels like a slow-building fever dream. At release, audiences were divided. Some critics admired its ambition, but many viewers were frustrated. The narrative doesn't resolve cleanly. The symbolism isn't spelled out. The atmosphere grows heavier with each passing scene. It's a film about artistic block, but it feels like being stuck inside the block itself. In the early 90s, that wasn't necessarily a crowd pleaser, but as the Coen brothers' legacy grew, people began revisiting Barton Fink, and with distance, it became clear how sharp it really is. Its commentary on Hollywood, its exploration of ego and identity, its subtle horror elements. Today, it's often cited as essential Coen brothers viewing, A bold, uncompromising piece of filmmaking that refuses to simplify itself. It didn't fail because it was weak. It struggled because it demanded effort. 12 Monkeys, 1995. Time travel stories usually rely on clarity. 12 Monkeys embraces chaos. Directed by Terry Gilliam, the film follows a man sent back in time from a devastated future to prevent a catastrophic virus outbreak. But the timelines blur. Memories distort. Mental instability becomes part of the narrative. Bruce Willis delivers a restrained performance, while Brad Pitt gives an unhinged, electric turn that would eventually earn major recognition. The film did reasonably well at the box office, but it wasn't an instant classic in the mainstream sense. Some audiences found it confusing, others found it too bleak. It doesn't offer simple hope, it offers inevitability, and that's uncomfortable. But over time, the film's intelligence became undeniable. Its structure rewards repeat viewings. Its themes, pandemic fear, conspiracy culture, fractured reality, feel eerily prescient. Now it's widely considered one of the smartest sci-fi films of the decade. It trusted viewers to pay attention, and eventually they did. Delicatessen, 1991. There are movies that feel safe, and then there's Delicatessen, set in a crumbling post-apocalyptic apartment building. This dark French comedy revolves around a landlord who provides meat to his starving tenants, and no one asks too many questions about where that meat comes from. It's grotesque, whimsical, romantic, violent, tender, and completely unlike anything else released in mainstream cinemas at the time. When it first arrived, it felt too eccentric for wide audiences. The humor was offbeat. The tone shifted between absurdity and darkness without warning. Its visual style was exaggerated, almost theatrical. But those very qualities are what allowed it to survive. Over time, film lovers began celebrating its inventiveness, the rhythmic physical comedy, the handcrafted production design, the strange but sincere love story at its core. It became a staple of art house discussions and international cinema lists. What once felt niche slowly transformed into beloved. Some films don't need mass approval. They just need the right audience to find them. Dead Man, 1995. Westerns in the 90s were expected to carry momentum. Guns blazing, moral clarity, wide landscapes filled with movement. Dead Man does the opposite. Shot in black and white and directed by Jim Jarmusch, the film follows a quiet accountant named William Blake who drifts through the American frontier after being wounded. Along the way, he encounters a Native American guide who believes he's already a spirit moving toward the afterlife. It's slow, hypnotic, minimal. The soundtrack pulses like a heartbeat. The dialogue is sparse. The journey feels dreamlike rather than adventurous. Audiences expecting a traditional Western likely felt disconnected. It didn't provide action in the conventional sense. It dismantled the myth instead of celebrating it. At the box office, it struggled, but slowly it earned respect. Film fans began appreciating it as a poetic deconstruction of the Western genre, a meditation on death, identity, and the violence embedded in American mythology. Today, it's often cited as one of the most unique Westerns ever made, not because it entertained loudly, but because it lingered quietly. Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, 1999. Another Jim Jarmusch project that slipped past mainstream audiences. And Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, Forrest Whitaker plays a hitman who lives by the ancient samurai code, applying centuries-old philosophy to modern urban crime. It sounds absurd, but the film plays it completely straight. Ghost Dog reads from the Hagakure. He meditates, he moves with calm precision, and yet he works for aging mobsters who barely understand him. The tone is quiet, almost meditative. There's action, but it's restrained. There's humor, but it's subtle. When it first released, it didn't ignite theaters. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't aggressively marketed. It didn't fit neatly into a genre box, but something about it stuck. The blend of hip-hop culture and samurai ethics, the introspective pacing, Whitaker's understated performance. Over time, serious film lovers embraced it. It became a cult classic, quoted, studied, appreciated for its originality. It proved that a crime film could be philosophical without losing its edge. Dark City, 1998. Timing can be cruel. Dark City arrived just before science fiction would be redefined at the end of the decade. It carried heavy noir influences, expressionist visuals, and a deeply philosophical core. The story centers on a man who wakes up with no memory in a city that physically reshapes itself at midnight. Identities are altered. Buildings shift. Time feels artificial. The atmosphere is dense, almost oppressive. When it was released, audiences didn't fully embrace it. Some found it too confusing. Others thought it was overly stylized. It was overshadowed by bigger, louder films. But years later, viewers returned to it, and they saw something remarkable. The visual ambition, the existential questions about identity and free will, the moody aesthetic that felt both retro and futuristic. Now, it's praised as one of the most imaginative sci-fi noirs of the era, a film that deserved far more recognition than it initially received. Sometimes innovation just arrives a little too early. The Big Lebowski, 1998. It's almost hard to believe now, but The Big Lebowski wasn't a phenomenon when it first hit theaters. It didn't dominate the box office. Reviews were mixed. Some critics found it too meandering. The plot wanders. The stakes feel absurdly low. The characters are eccentric to the point of caricature, and yet that's exactly why it survived. At its core, the film follows Jeff the Dude Lebowski, a laid-back slacker pulled into a bizarre kidnapping scheme. But the narrative isn't really the point. The vibe is the point. The dialogue, the rhythm, the strange philosophy of simply abiding. When it hit home video, something clicked. People started quoting it, sharing it, rewatching it. Entire festivals formed around it. Academic essays analyzed it. Fans dressed as the Dude and Walter. It transformed from underperformer to cultural landmark. Some comedies aged poorly. This one aged into legend. Office Space, 1999. At first glance, Office Space looks small. No massive action, no elaborate set pieces, just cubicles, awkward meetings, and fluorescent lighting. In theaters, it didn't make much noise, but when it reached home audiences, it found its people. Anyone who had ever felt drained by corporate monotony suddenly saw themselves on screen. The meaningless paperwork, the passive-aggressive management, the quiet rebellion of simply not caring anymore. It wasn't exaggerated satire. It felt real. Over time, lines from the film became shorthand for workplace frustration. It became the movie people recommended to co-workers who needed to feel understood. Now it's considered one of the defining comedies about office culture. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. The Shawshank Redemption, 1994. Few examples are more dramatic than this one. When The Shawshank Redemption was released, it didn't dominate theaters. It faced stiff competition. Its marketing was modest. It didn't feel like an event. But then came word of mouth. Cable reruns, video rentals, late-night viewings. Audiences connected deeply with its story of hope and endurance, the friendship between Andy and Red, the slow burn of resilience against cruelty. The more people watched it, the more they shared it. Over time, it climbed rankings. It became a staple of greatest films ever made lists. It earned a reputation for emotional power that few movies achieve, and it didn't need a huge opening weekend. It needed time to be discovered. And once it was, it never disappeared again. Donnie Darko, 2001. Technically just beyond the 90s, but spiritually tied to everything the decade experimented with. When Donnie Darko first released, it struggled. The marketing was unclear. The tone was melancholic and strange. The story involved time loops, existential dread, and a teenage boy guided by a man in a rabbit costume. It wasn't designed for mainstream clarity. Its theatrical run was modest. Many people missed it entirely, but then DVDs started circulating. College dorm rooms, online forums, late-night rewatches, viewers dissected every detail, theories multiplied. Soundtrack moments became iconic. The film grew organically, powered not by marketing, but by curiosity. It became a cult phenomenon, a reminder that some movies don't need immediate validation. They need discovery. The 90s weren't just about the movies that dominated headlines. They were about risks, about filmmakers pushing tone, structure, and genre boundaries. And sometimes when something pushes too far ahead of its audience, it gets overlooked. But the good ones always come back. They wait, ready, they become unforgettable.